Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, Objectively Dan. This is the show where every week we talk about what people believe and why, with guests from all around the world, with all kinds of positions, ideas, and things that they just want to talk about. Joining us this week is a very special guest, a friend of mine, actually. Goes by the moniker of Telltale Atheist, also known as Owen Morgan. Telltale, how's it going, bud?
It's going well. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's been a while since you and I have talked. We first met actually at the Faithless Forum last year in Dallas, Texas, which we're both actually going to be speaking at again this year. And I had been familiar with your stuff before. I think that was the first time you met me. And gosh, I mean, your channel, for those of you who don't know, is just full of all kinds of great material, specifically on like cults and stuff. That's really what you focus on. And also a special emphasis on like Jehovah's Witness material in particular. And I was just hoping we could kind of just start this conversation by just talking about what you do and like why you've chosen that as your particular like thing on YouTube.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I started out talking about Kent Hovind and generally just kind of extremist Christians, Ken Ham, people like that. Eventually, I decided to kind of venture into Jehovah's Witness territory. Now, I didn't know how popular that was going to be, but I ended up doing my first video on it. It was big. I mean, people seemed to enjoy it. So I was pretty happy about that because that's something that I really wanted to talk about. And I didn't think that video was going to hit. I thought it was a myth. But sure enough, it worked out. And I've been talking about Jehovah's Witnesses ever since. That kind of formed my pathway into extremism generally. I started talking about Mormonism because I didn't want it to be exclusive to Jehovah's Witnesses, of course. And, you know, any kind of crazy cult I could come up with. I talked about Heaven's Gate and Jonestown and just a bunch of them.
Yeah, you and I actually,
that's what I do now.
We collaborated on a video together. It was a while back now, I guess a few months ago, on the Waco siege and the stuff that happened with David Koresh and those guys. And that was really interesting. I think I want to kind of talk about a little bit about your background. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but like, I think your depiction of, or I'm going to say criticism, I guess. I try to be as neutral and as, you know, inviting to anybody's positions on here as I can be. But your story of how you grew up in the Jehovah's Witness faith is, to me, absolutely just, well, first of all, it makes me angry, but it's also terrifying to know that this kind of happened to you. And there's just so many people who just don't know anything about, you know, like Jehovah's Witnesses in general. I know I didn't before I even ran across your channel and stuff. And I just wanted to know if you were willing to kind of talk about that a little bit more for people.
Yeah, sure. So my story isn't, I don't know that I would say that my story is particularly bad. I mean, there are people with worse stories than mine, of course. But my story is one of social isolation, pretty heavy on that. You know, as a Jehovah's Witness, wasn't really allowed to have worldly friends, quote unquote. Wasn't allowed to have friends with people outside of the religion. And that's bad. I mean, that scarred my social life permanently. And this is the story of millions of people. There are millions of people. Somebody right now is sitting at their house alone because they don't have any friends. They're not allowed to have any friends. So that's kind of, I think that's the root of the thing that motivates me. That and the stories of people who are being kicked out of their houses right now at 16, 17, 18 years old. You know, it's happening right now. I talked to 3 or 4 different people around that age who are going through that exact experience right now. The same experience I went through when I was 18. So I'm hyper-focused on helping people deal with that type of situation. Not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but Mormons and cult members generally.
Do you mind going into detail a little bit more? Like what happened when you were 18?
Yeah. Okay. So, oh, where to begin? So I was born. I'll start there. I was born into the religion, and you know, my parents, they were not born into it. They converted. My dad converted to be with my mom and all of this other stuff. They were in the military before that, but my brother and I were both born into it. I have 2 other siblings who weren't, but we grew up this way, believing these strange things. And it's a little bit different for us, people who were born into cults, because a cult is, their goal is to kind of replace your authentic personality with the cult personality, with the traits that they want you to have. For example, commonly cults will want you to be malleable and humble and willing to please people and willing to give up your money and things like that, right? Mm-hmm. But what is my authentic self as a born-in cult member? Did I have an authentic self in the first place? Those are questions that I had to face. So when I turned 16, 17 years old, started kind of asking questions about the religion. You know, I was trying to have a normal social life, trying to live and have fun and have friends. There weren't really any, there weren't any Jehovah's Witnesses my age. So I ended up looking to the outside world for friends when I turned about 17, 18 years old. And I had a job. I started like doing things that Jehovah's Witnesses frown upon, but the rest of the world might not necessarily frown upon. For example, I was drinking alcohol. Of course, I was underage at the time. I was 18. That was wrong for sure. But it wasn't disfellowshipping wrong. It wasn't take your family away for the rest of your life wrong, right? That's a little bit of a disproportionate response to what I was doing. I also smoked a cigarette at that time, and they used that as a reason to disfellowship me. There were other things going on in my life at that time that they used to disfellowship me. But yeah, 18 years old, I wasn't done with high school. I was in 11th grade. Because of some weird stuff that happened. They homeschooled me for a while, and I had to go back and all kinds of stuff. So I wasn't supposed to graduate until I was 19. I was in 11th grade at the time when my parents kicked me out. And I ended up crawling in the window of this girl's house that I knew from school, and I stayed in her bedroom without her family knowing for 3 weeks. You don't really realize what's involved in hiding from a family like that until you have to do it, you know, until you have to live in a bedroom. I mean, sneaking food and everything. But, you know, I ended up meeting that family, and they have replaced the family that I lost in a big way. They are my family now after 10, actually, you know, this was at 18 and I'm 29. So almost 12 years, I'd say. It's been almost 12 years since I've known these people, and they've just taken care of me like their own son. So, my story ended well in the sense that I have people who care about me and who take care of me. I can't say the same for a lot of these kids who are dealing with this right now. So that's kind of the story. That's what happened.
Yeah, so I want to talk about this idea because you use the word cult. And I know you talk about this a lot in your channel. I know growing up for me, as a Christian, I kind of associated Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons in the same kind of category to me because they were both kind of this other kind of Christian thing that like most people I knew just kind of looked down upon for some reason, that I didn't really know much about them. I knew that they didn't celebrate their birthdays, and I knew that they went door to door for people, and that was about it. I didn't really realize the depth and just the level of, I'm going to use the word control, that the Jehovah's Witnesses kind of has over their congregations. I think that's a fair word to say, as far as like their own newsletter publications, their own sort of leadership, their own sort of rules on how to dress, how to interact with other people. The idea that you couldn't have any like secular friends to me, that was a new one for me. And I didn't know about this until I saw your channel, actually. I think was the first I kind of heard about a lot of this. And I think that's the case for most people. I don't think the average person really knows a lot about Jehovah's Witnesses and what kind of goes on. And it's just really shocking to me, especially if you look at the history and kind of the abuses that have happened with this organization, of just how much one group of people can get away with doing so much.
Yeah, that's definitely true. You know, talking about cults, I think that the thing that kind of denotes a cult, I've talked about this on my channel. You know this. A lot of people know this, but for the audience anyways, there's something called the BITE model. It stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotion Control. BITE. It's an acronym. And it kind of goes through a list of things that that you can expect from a cult, that you can expect a cult to do, with the end goal of replacing your personality with the one that they want you to have. So if I look at a cult member and I see this fake plastic persona sitting on the top layer there, it's probably a cult to me. I can just talking to one of the members about the religion and then talking about sports or something, usually I'll be able to tell if it's a cult or not that way. But yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses are most definitely a cult because they, among other things, exert something called undue influence. Now, a lot of this stuff, you know, I didn't come up with any of this. I got to give credit where credit's due. A lot of this came from Stephen Hassan. He wrote a book called Combating Cult Mind Control, talks about a lot of this stuff. In fact, he's written 3 books now. It's got a 4th coming out, I think, in September. Really fantastic guy. All this stuff's been accepted by the psychology community, so you guys should check that out. If you have not read that book, you should read that book for sure. But yeah. So the book, it talks a lot about undue influence, where people don't understand the consequences of the actions. For example, if somebody tells them, okay, here's a good example. A child is kind of pushed by its parents to get baptized as a Jehovah's Witness. That kid can say until they're blue in the face that it was their choice and they wanted to. But was it really? I mean, you know, they're impressionable, they're young, they don't really know the consequences of this baptism. Was it really their choice? No, it wasn't. It was undue influence by the cult.
I want to talk. Oh man, there's so much we can dive into here. Just to remind people, though, this is a call-in show. We are going to be taking calls in a second. So if you want to come and talk to me or Telltale about Jehovah's Witness stuff, or just really any topic in general, as long as we're talking about beliefs, we are open to it. The phone number that is on screen, it is 512-686-0279. Go ahead and give us a phone call. Yeah, we are live here with Telltale Atheist, YouTuber, podcast producer, ex-Jehovah's Witness, has a lot to say about cults. He's been doing this thing for a few years now, and a personal friend of mine. He has just an interesting story and an interesting view on things. I think, you know, like, we use the term cult very liberally, I think, you know, at least in the United States, from my experience. I think we talk about we call things cults kind of all the time, but it's interesting to me that we can actually kind of break this word down into a science of sorts, and have a lot of scholarship on the ideas of, okay, like, how do we define cults as opposed to just general religions and stuff? Like, is this group a cult? Is this group a cult? And we can kind of see kind of a piece-by-piece breakdown of what makes something a cult. What do you think it is that makes Jehovah's Witnesses a cult?
It's a good question. Here's the thing. Something I've noticed with Mormonism, for example. A lot of the time, Mormons will, this is their tactic for getting out of the whole "you're a cult" accusation. They will pick out one thing and say, well, look, you know, Catholicism does this thing. For example, they'll say a cult is, they'll just take any random dictionary definition of cult and they'll say, for example, one of them is venerate somebody, worship some figure who's still alive or something. Well, look, Catholics have the Pope, so yeah, I guess they're a cult. I'm a cult. We'll just all accept the title of cult, right? That's the tactic that they take. And I remember when I was when I was studying to be a Jehovah's Witness, when I was studying to get baptized, they kind of gave me a similar line. They said, here's a dictionary definition. Somebody or a group who practices strange beliefs and worships a person. Of course, that's kind of an outdated, odd, vague definition. So we can look to the psychology community and figure out exactly what defines a cult. And as far as the psychology community is concerned, that is the bite model. Things like, do they take advantage of you financially? Do they control your clothing and hairstyle? Do they regulate how and with whom you have sex? Do they, that's all under behavior. Let me think about some thought ones. Do they inspire a black and white, us versus them kind of mentality? Let's see. Do they threaten your friends or family? Do they make your family shun you if you leave? Do they shame you publicly for changing your beliefs on something? Do you have to have this collectivist, us versus them mindset about things? That kind of thing. So those are the things that, if we went down the list, those are the things that you would see Jehovah's Witnesses doing in a really big way. Now, there are different extremes for each thing. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses are really bad about shunning. Mormonism, not so much. Mormonism is worse on other things than Jehovah's Witnesses. So you have to kind of, there is no exact science when you get down to it, but if you can look at this group and see them kind of setting up this system of rewards and punishments for this rule, for the set of rules that they have, and if you can see this hierarchy that's enforcing this system of rewards and punishments to try to mold somebody's personality into what they want it to be, it's a cult.
You know, it's funny. I went to New Orleans this past weekend. I went up there to see my girlfriend, Christy, and we were going downtown in the French Quarter. And if you've ever been to New Orleans, or at least you've heard about it, you know, it can be a pretty debaucherous city. You know, you got people dressed in all sorts of colors and clothing, people coming in and out of bars and stuff. And it was so funny because we were driving down the French Quarter, and in the middle of all this, you know, partying and stuff going on downtown, it was on a weekend, and it's almost Mardi Gras season down there. There was two people there, a man and a woman, dressed very conservatively with like this kind of, you know, these signs and stuff everywhere saying like, oh, if you want to learn the truth of the Bible, like here, come look at this stuff. And I realized, oh, these guys are Jehovah's Witnesses. And they just look so uncomfortable. They just look so like out of place, especially compared to everywhere else. And it kind of reminded me of you because I know this, you know, that's the kind of the world.
Because I look uncomfortable all the time.
No, it's just, you know, like you see these people and they pass by through your life, you know, like they come to your door and then they leave. And I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in their home life. I don't know what their relationships are like with other people. I don't know what the kind of struggles they're going through. And it fills me with a kind of sadness when I see something like that. You know, like I don't want to make fun of these people. There's a part of me that wants to help these people. But of course, I can't just go up to somebody and say, hey, you're in a cult. Let me help you. Let me pull you out of here. You know, like that's just not how we kind of socialize ourselves. So like, what is your take on like just even talking to people who you believe might be in a cult or something like the Jehovah's Witnesses? I mean, like, especially if they're out on the street. I mean, do you engage with people when you see them? Do you just kind of avoid them? I mean, what's your take on kind of talking to people? It
depends. So a while back, I made a video called How to Troll Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, this was a little bit clickbaity. I will admit it. I apologize for the clickbaitiness of it, but it was really talking about how to talk to them, what you're supposed to do. So usually Jehovah's Witnesses get a number of different responses. It'll either be not interested, go away, or you know, they'll slam the door in your face, or sometimes they get invited in. If you don't want Jehovah's Witnesses there, you don't have to release dogs on them. That happened to me when I was like 9 years old. You don't have to release dogs on them. You don't have to hold a shotgun in their face. It's unnecessary. You can just say, put me on a do not call list. And because they have this list that's supposed to be to prevent them from bothering people in the neighborhood. You know, just ask them to put you on the do not call list and they won't show up for like 5-10 more years. They'll come every 5 to 10 years, make sure that you still live there. Just tell them again, it's no big thing. You know, it's sad when people get abused like that. I remember that happening to me. I have nothing against Jehovah's Witnesses as people, nothing against them. I want to help them, just like you were saying. I want to help them find their way out and recognize, like, the Watchtower Society is kind of the amoral monster that it is. But honestly, my best approach, I've moved into this house probably 2 years ago, and I've been waiting for a Jehovah's Witness to show up since, because I'm in a different district now. They don't know me now. Yeah. So they would come knock, and, you know, I'd invite them in and see if we could work that belief right out of them. But I have not seen one yet. They knocked on my door, left a tract like 6 months ago. I was so disappointed I missed them. But yeah, I figured my best approach at talking to Jehovah's Witnesses and other cult members generally is street epistemology. That's really the best way to do it. I talk about it all the time on my channel as a really good method of trying to cast off that fake personality, that cult personality, trying to get them to recognize that their beliefs are irrational, and help them kind of restore their authentic self as best as I can.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear here, you know, I try to be as open to all kinds of positions as possible, but every time I look at the history of Jehovah's Witnesses, and you really do a deep dive on this stuff, and especially when I'm hearing stories like yours and others on YouTube from the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, you know, it's hard for me to just be like, okay, let's meet on common ground and kind of talk about this. It's so, because it's so obvious to me. It seems so obvious to me. And even though it might sound so imperialistic to say, like, oh, we have to go out and help these people, like, I mean, how else are people going to escape a lot of these abuses if you don't have systems in check internally in these kinds of organizations to help the people who are in need? I mean, yeah, you've talked about this on your channel, but countless time and time again, when somebody is crying for help, they seem to be stuck in a system that either ignores them or tries to shun them or shut them up in some ways. Yeah. And there's so much documentation of cases of, you know, sexual abuse and all kinds of stuff that gets covered up by the Watchtower organization, like you said, and Watchtower Society, I think. And I just, you know, it's hard for me to look at that and be happy about that and say, like, oh yeah, let's enjoy the conversation. Let's try to figure out what truth is. To me, it's just like, this is just, it's a dead end to me. And
it's difficult, but you know, it's still the approach that you have to take in conversations like this, even though, you know, you're on this side and it's really hard to relate to that mindset. Honestly, it's hard to do, but it's still the direction you have to take. You still have to try to find common ground and work with them and be willing to give concessions here or there, right?
Absolutely. Like, I just think, like, what if my brother decided he wanted to join, you know, the Jehovah's Witness or something? Like, first off, I would show him your videos probably, but it's like, yeah, I want to help this person out. Like, I want them to help out. Like, okay, well, let's look at this organization. You know, like, let's see what they've done before. Are they reputable? Have they done good things? I have zero doubts in my mind that Jehovah's Witnesses all over the globe have done great things for people as far as community events and given people a sense of belonging and togetherness. But it's just a situation of, well, do the harms outweigh the goods here? And, you know, in my assessment of this, I have to say yes. You know, if there's a Jehovah's Witness that's watching this right now and wants to talk to us about it, by all means, come on and talk to us. But this is one of those cases where it's like, yeah, man, I can't, you know, I can't it's hard for me to see people go on doing stuff like this, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to watch. But like I said, I mean, we just take it one day at a time. I actually know, like, a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and I know a couple of current ones, but generally they're not allowed to talk to somebody like me. I was kind of hoping that maybe we would get, like, a Jehovah's Witness on, but I don't have high hopes for it because, you know, just talking to me is a disfellowshipping offense. They will lose their friends and family just for talking to me, or listening to me.
Well, actually, it looks like we do have a few calls, at least from one ex-Jehovah's Witness here who wants to join the conversation, and some other calls. So, again, if you want to call up on the show, I have the number here for you. It's 512-686-0279. It's also on the screen. We have a few more lines open, so please come on down. I think we're about ready to take in some calls and talk to some people. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool, cool. Before we do that, I just want to say that the ACA newsletter is out. That's the Atheist Community of Austin. That's where this show is being produced. It is out this month for February. Here's a little video here for you guys on listening to the podcast. You can't see this. We got a little animation going on showing us what's in this month. We got some pretty cool articles and stuff, so go check that out. Link is going to be in the description for that if you're watching this live. Hopefully somebody can put something in the chat there. So yeah, definitely check that out. We're going to go ahead and start with some calls, I think. One second there. Sorry, guys. I want to go to Delon first. Delon has called on the show before, but he happens to be an ex-Jehovah's Witness, so I think his, his take on this might be really interesting. Delon, you are on the air again. What's up, bud?
All right. How's it going, man?
Hey, it's going really good. Good to hear from you again.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I used to be a Jehovah's Witness for years. I was a ministerial servant and was working towards being what they call an elder. So a ministerial servant is sort of like a deacon in the church. It'd be kind of equal to that, but I was really super, super duper zealous. So I was one of those guys who just couldn't wait to get out in the field service and knock on doors, go on Bible studies, go to the meetings, just serve in any capacity I could. I was like a real, soldier for that stuff.
So what eventually got you out of that?
Yeah, so really interesting. So as zealous as I was, and I used to just study all the time, maybe even to my detriment, as far as the witnesses were concerned, because I would go and I would just look at all sorts of information. But I actually I used to work at the Virginia State Police when I lived in Virginia. And a guy that I used to always try to witness to was an atheist. And he was an older guy, really smart guy. Really wouldn't argue with me, but just would ask me certain questions that just stumped me, and just enough of that conversation just kind of wore me down to where I kind of saw the illogic in a lot of my beliefs, and I couldn't really defend my beliefs so much. And he really wasn't attacking any particular teaching or any kind of Bible, scriptural teaching or anything like that. He was coming at it from just a very basic level of how do you even prove that a God exists, we would just talk about that, just that one particular subject. And I just couldn't get this guy to understand, and every question he would turn around on me would stump me because I really didn't have an answer. The guy was really smart, really, really, wise, and it really kind of took me out of the faith. That just, that on top of other stuff, and then my eyes were kind of open. One of the really sad things was we had a sister at the congregation who was a really good friend of me and my wife at the time, and her son was molested by one of the elders at the congregation, and they met about to judge the guy and see what they're going to do with him. He admitted he did molest the daughter, and the sad thing is he was not disfellowshipped. He was no longer an elder, but he wasn't disfellowshipped. But then the lady whose daughter was molested really got freaked out about it and smoked a cigarette,
Uh-oh.
And someone saw her smoking a cigarette, and she got disfellowshipped for it.
Wow.
So it was really
Aren't their priorities like completely twisted around?
Yeah, and I was just, as a bystander involved in it, I was just sitting there thinking, what in the world are we doing to this person,
So let me ask you this. What year was it that you kind of left the religion or the cult?
Yeah, so that was a long time ago. That was back in 1994 when I left.
Okay. I was wondering because I think it was somewhere around 2000. I don't know. I think I stopped going to meetings like 2008 or something like that. And so much has changed since I left. It's like all this new light and all these new, new light, quote unquote, all these ideas and differences. Like, they didn't have cart witnessing when I was there. Now you can kind of stand on a street corner and wait for people to approach you. But when I was in it and when you were in it, we had to go knock on people's doors and come up with these presentations. And it was hard, Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But, with all that doubt going along in my mind and then seeing all of that stuff, it all kind of just caught up to me. And I just thought, this is all bullshit, man. Let me just get out.
What you're telling me, Delon,
the elders.
It's atheist evangelism that got you out of it. Is that what it is? Somebody
exactly. Yep. Atheist evangelism. He got me out, man. He dropped seeds of doubt, and really, I thank the guy for my life, because, the other thing is, I don't know how it is now, but back then they used to shun you if you looked for higher education. And I was a young guy, got married really young, because the witnesses said, well, because when they did find me, they came to my door. I was a 20-year-old guy. I was living with this girl, and, I became a witness. We both became a witness, and we had to get married, So we got married really young. I didn't have any education. I was planning on going to college in information technology way back in 1990. And they said, yeah, you can't really do that. You need to focus mainly on studying the Bible and teaching other people the truth.
Yeah, I don't want to get too educated, Yeah,
you don't want to get educated. That's a no-no. That's putting the devil's system first.
Yeah, it's so easy for me as an outsider to just call that out and be like, oh yeah, that's bullshit. Like, obviously you don't want to do that, but like, I can imagine growing up in that situation when that's all you've ever known, and that you've always been told to trust in these authority figures. I'm bringing this up because, gosh, I saw something on Facebook that made me mad the other day. It was somebody that was saying like, oh, well, why can't we just say that we as atheists are just like superior and like we're just smarter than everybody else? Like, why do we have to dance around this subject and pretend like we're just as good as everybody else? And it's just like, because we are just as good as everybody else. Like, anybody born in those kinds of circumstances is going to have those.
And let me, and I did want to kind of bring this up because I think we sort of kind of touched on it already in your conversations, but one of the things about the draw, because you would think this stuff is so kind of crazy, why would somebody like go along with that stuff? Especially if you don't have that background, you weren't raised in it. Like, I wasn't really raised in the church or any really religious background at all. But what they do is they kind of have a really good way of teaching you certain aspects of the Bible and of, the history of the Bible and things of that nature that really a lot of Christians aren't aware of. Teachings on hell, the soul, heaven and hell, immortal souls, the Trinity. And they bring up a lot of history, Christian history, about how these things actually were formed a long time ago, and it kind of like sheds light on the falsities of Christendom in their teaching, and you kind of feel like you're part of a special group of people that know certain things that the rest of the world are just really ignorant about.
That's so interesting. I hear the same thing from people who used to believe in conspiracy theories. They say the exact same thing. They say, oh, like, I felt special because I felt like I knew something that I had to tell the world. And suddenly that gives you a narrative. That gives you like a purpose, right? Like, you want to, again, like I joking earlier, but like evangelize, like tell other people about this thing because you have this truth that everybody else needs to know. I can totally see the appeal of that. I mean, as you know myself, I was doing the same thing when I was part of an evangelical Christian group, and it's especially when you're in community that's already giving you all these other needs, like that's giving you friends, that's giving you goals to look forward to, that's giving you jobs in a lot of cases. There almost isn't a reason to look outside of the bubble that you kind of are a part of, because, I mean, why? What's out there is evil. What we have here is good, and you can see that based on, your own lived experiences and stuff. Of course, that's not the experience for everybody that's inside. But, there's, for some people, the reason why they stay is because they really enjoy it. I know I did.
Yeah, it just covered. They really just kind of they're kind of like a checkbox religion, but at the same time they're a high stakes religion. So you've got a nice little dynamic going on right there. You've got, look, we're no part of the world. We don't go to these wars that are all in the name of religion and all this other stuff. Checkbox. We don't teach falsehoods. You know, all these biblical things can be checked on, and you can see that, you know, the Trinity was a Catholic Church creation back in 325 at the Council of Nicaea. Check. Also, look at all the nice people. You come to the Kingdom Hall, everybody's so super friendly, nice, helpful, all of that. So check that off. And on the other hand, if you disobey us, if you kind of do the wrong thing, then you're going to be separated from all of that.
Yeah, so, there's a real punishment, a real risk.
Yeah, rewards and
yourself.
Punishment system. I wanted to actually touch on that because, Delon, the point you're making there, I'm definitely picking up on that, where you're talking about how they have some truth mixed into this. Like, yeah, that's true. They're right that hell wasn't really in the Bible as Christians believe it to be now. The Trinity is not, you know, accurate. Like, it was added in later. So they get these little tiny pieces of facts that you can legitimately look up and find to be facts. And that lends credibility to everything else that they say from then on. And something else I've noticed they like to do is they like to take scriptures from like verses from 3 different books of the Bible and then put them next to each other and then read them side by side. That's a pretty common. For example, the way they get the 1914 teaching is through a verse in Daniel, Revelation, and Numbers, right? Those books do not belong together. You can't crush them together and make a new story or anything. That's really what they're doing, right?
Right. Yep.
Well, Delon,
they harmonize it. They say, let the Bible interpret the Bible. Don't try to interpret the Bible. The scriptures interpret themselves.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us, Delon. I know you've called into the show before, but we haven't talked about Jehovah's Witness stuff in particular.
Super fascinating.
Yeah, it's really good. We're going to have to go to some other callers now, I think, but just thanks again for calling in and supporting the show, man.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, so those of you who are new, who are first calling into the line, we have full lines right now, so just be sure to stay on. We'll get to you soon. We're just kind of going in the order. I kind of feel like I have a list of all the callers that are on here. I love that so many people can come on the internet and just kind of share these experiences like this. This is something that just couldn't happen, a few decades ago, and I'm just so happy that we can kind of plug the dots together and be like, oh yeah, this is how all of this worked out. You can point at every little step in the process, you know?
Yeah, it's awesome. I don't know. There's something like, I just love talking to people about their experiences. That's what I do on my podcast too. And I especially like talking to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses because we can relate on such a fundamental level. Like, he's using a lot of the language that, you know, we used back in the day. He was saying sister and congregation and all this other stuff. So just brings back memories.
Well, I'm glad you like talking to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses because we actually have another ex-Jehovah's Witness on the line. This is Karen from California. Karen wanted to ask us about how we can discuss our difficulties, kind of explaining our past spiritual experiences with people. What's up, Karen?
Hi, this is Karen in California, and I'm actually not an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I'm sorry. I guess the screener misunderstood me.
Oh, okay.
I'm an ex-pagan.
Right. Okay. So
before.
Right. We've talked, and that's why I was a bit confused. Because I read that, and I know that you've called before, and I was like, oh, I didn't know Karen was also an ex-Jehovah's Witness too, along with being an ex-pagan. That's kind of an interesting timeline.
Ex-pagan, you say?
Some other religious experiences. Yeah. Actually, I was calling because I'm a big fan of Telltale. And I love your videos, and I'm an artist too, so I get mesmerized when you're drawing on the screen. But one of the reasons I'm calling is because a lot of the stuff you're talking about has really kind of helped me face some things myself. For example, you've done videos talking about how all religions can eventually become cults if certain people in certain circumstances make it that way. And I've had to face some of this myself. Like, since I'm a former pagan, we pagans always thought that we were the most free, that we don't have cults. But, you know, when I first started, I had to sign a several-page document that said that in all incarnations, I would stay within that religion. And you know what? What's more cult-like than that?
Sounds like they're trying to control you for sure. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I didn't know pagans did any paperwork. You know, I just kind of figured you
Yes. Oh, yeah. We do. It depends on what group you're in. But the other thing is, I wanted to compliment you on your video about paganism and Wicca. I thought that was very good. You did a lot of research, and I was pretty impressed by that. But I'm calling today because I have a question for both of you, because you guys both know how, and I admire both of you, because you can take a situation where someone has become part of something and has a hard time leaving the group or the cult because of shared experiences. And I had to face the fact recently when I started talking to some people who were either pagans or former pagans about how we had these shared experiences where we were really convinced that something supernatural had taken place. Now, I have a hard time talking about this because, you know, it's labeled by the atheist community as woo, okay? But for us, that was just as serious as Christians think their religion is to them. Now, I'll give you an example. Okay, now please don't laugh at me. It sounds silly, but like we would be doing a ritual, and our rituals are like services, okay, where we pray to our gods, and we're in a big open space outside. And when it was raining really hard, I am not joking, we would do either an offering or a prayer to Thor, the god of thunder and rain, or Frey, who was also a god of weather, and ask him to stop the weather, the raining at that moment. And it happened every single time. The sun would come out. There would be no rain until we went back in for the potluck. Okay. Now, I know that this is not logically necessarily what really happened in my mind now that I've left the religion. But at the same time, these are the things that are hardest to shake for me, you know, where we had these shared experiences where a prayer would come true, or a spell would come true, or a ritual would come true, and we saw the same thing. Sometimes we see things, like there have been people that have actually seen a god at the ritual, and several people say they see him. I mean, how do I, you know, this is the part I'm having a hard time getting past. I mean, I'm basically asking you guys for street epistemology, because it's really hard for me to stop believing those things were real. And I know, I can tell from my friends that I'm talking to, they're having a hard time stop believing it's real too. Oh, yeah. The ones that want to leave.
Oh, so much to break down. I'll go ahead and start first, and then I really want to hear Telltale's take on this. What I've learned from, especially recently as I've been teaching math at a school, human beings are just really bad at statistics, just innately in general. The way that our brains work just isn't really, I mean, we weren't necessarily built, I say the word built. We didn't evolve to be very good at the thing. I mean, like, obviously we've done so much, and human civilization has grown because of the mathematics we've done and the statistics we've done. But like, on an individual basis, the average person, when we're talking about events and probability and things like that, it doesn't really match up. You know, like we see things like, oh, we see these people on TV all the time winning the lottery. So it sounds like, oh, you know, anybody can win, and who knows, it could be us next. And we don't really put into numbers in our heads like, oh, only 1 in a billion people actually win. And we don't realize how like small of a chance that is and stuff. All that to say, like, I think we can point to everybody in the world having some sort of spiritual experience, and I'm using the term spiritual experience loosely, because of probabilities and like prior events and knowledges that we don't have that are contributing to these things. For example, let me give you a good take on this. I was in the car with, this was a long time ago, with a girl that I liked, that we were both Christian at the time. And I was talking about how much I like the band Gungor. I really like them a lot. And I had a Spotify playlist going on. Gungor is a Christian band, by the way. Well, they're not as Christian now, but it's complicated. But anyway, I was talking about how much I like them and stuff. And I think I was thinking about them because I had the Spotify list on, and there was a Gungor song on there. And lo and behold, there was a Gungor song that played next on this list. And the girl I was talking to that was in the car with me didn't actually know that that was on the list. She thought I was just talking about it. And she heard this thing. It was like, whoa, there's this Gunker song that came on. We were just talking about it. It must be like kind of a God thing that just happened right now. Because she thought I just had my playlist on shuffle when really that was the next thing on. Like, coming from the other side of that experience and knowing exactly what happened and saying, oh, I had this song on the list next, and you know, this is how this played out. Like, it almost seemed, it was like laughable to me at the time that she would put like a significant, you know, thing to that experience, like a significant marker to say, oh, this was like a God moment for her. And of course I didn't make fun of her or anything. I thought I just explained to her what happened, but that was a moment for me that made me kind of realize, like, oh, maybe this is how some people on the other side of some other, you know, either cult experiences or other kinds of experiences are happening. Like, maybe this is what this kind of feels like. And how often do experiences like that happen to people all the time and they don't even realize it? And then they put it into this box of, these are my God moments. This is how I know, like, God is a thing, or the pagan gods, or however you want to construct that, you know?
Yeah,
what do you think about this, Telltale?
actually, I can touch on that too. I think you're right. We're kind of pattern-seeking creatures, right? We want to see patterns, like the face on the surface of Mars, for example. We're looking for explanations. We're looking for something that's bigger than us. My issue is that our senses are very unreliable. So I would like to see if maybe I can, like, if we can reproduce it, if we can talk to somebody and see if they can pray to Thor to stop the rain, for example, and watch it happen in front of us and repeat that experiment, I'd feel a lot better about it. In fact, I may even be willing to come over to the other side. I mean, if we could reproduce that reliably and see that Thor is actually stopping the rain, I would be a pagan too. Of course, you're saying that you're not pagan anymore, but I would say one step toward maybe not necessarily throwing off these ideas, but testing them out is going out there and experimenting. See if you can reliably reproduce the results. See if you can pray to Thor and stop the rain, for example.
That's a good idea. Sometimes it happens only in groups. And this is something I was talking about with a former pagan just last week, is that sometimes these things will work really well in a group of people, but not so good when we're working on it by ourselves, which is very interesting.
What's the minimum?
We're trying to figure out ways to come up.
Can we establish boundaries here? Like, do we know? Because what if we at the ACA, the people that are here right now, if we did some sort of ritual right now, do you think we could make something happen?
Let's get a group together.
You know,
if it has to be done in groups, let's do it in a group.
That actually sounds kind of like one of the things that we were always talking about. And one of the reasons I left paganism was because people said you had to believe in the gods for it to work. And my thing was like, no, you shouldn't have to believe in them. If they're real, they're going to do it, right? But I guess what I'm having issues with is, you know, how to talk to people who were in this religion with me that say to me things like, well, traditional medicine didn't do anything for me. The only thing that's ever worked is homeopathy. And I know that homeopathy doesn't work. You know, I know that. And it's just frustrating because I know how they feel on their side of it, because I know that some things have happened to me so consistently that I really did believe that there was a reality to this supernatural otherworld. So I'm feeling a little frustrated and a little confused here as to how to deal not just with their questions, but also my own sadness of leaving and then saying to myself, well, was it never real? It's sort of like, I sort of feel like, you know, like in those chick flicks or in those songs where somebody realizes the person they were in love with was never in love with them. And then you realize, oh, it was never real. You know, it's sad.
For sure. I definitely know what you mean. A lot of the time when people leave a religion, they usually go through an angry phase and a sad phase, not necessarily in that order. and then they kind of calm down and try to, my goal is to try to channel that energy into something productive, like pulling other people out of these harmful cults and things. But as far as the questions go, I definitely understand where you're coming from. There's this logical fallacy called moving the goalpost, where you ask them a question, you know, how can we prove this? And then they just keep pushing it back, you know, well, it has to be in a group has to do it. And then, well, that group has to be believers. And then if you came with a whole group of believers, say 1,000 people who believed in this, they were ready to pray, and it didn't work, they'd come up with another reason why. So you have to ask yourself at some point, where do you want to place that goalpost? Where is it, when is it actually unreasonable to think that this is actually going to work, you know?
So, Telltale, let me ask you this. I don't know for sure, but I get the impression from the things that you said that the Jehovah Witnesses was a whole nother world that was different from the rest of society. And that's how I feel about paganism. I feel like we were in another mental world than everyone else. And so I want to ask you, what do you do when you run into Jehovah Witnesses? I mean, how do you talk to them when they look down on you for no longer being in your religion?
Well,
in your former religion.
Well, when I talk to a Jehovah's Witness, it's a little bit of a unique experience because I have to decide whether or not I want to reveal who I actually am, right? If they realize that I'm disfellowshipped and not associated with the religion anymore, they're going to shut down and physically turn around and not look at me anymore and walk the other direction. So if I want to have a conversation with them, what I have to do is tell them that I've kind of been interested in it for a while, and that I haven't taken it anywhere, but I'm interested in what they have to say, and maybe drop some of the language. Like, I went to a couple of meetings, my congregation, this or that, I talked to sister, whatever, use some of the words that they like to use, and they start to kind of loosen up and feel a little bit more comfortable with me. But generally, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience talking to Jehovah's Witnesses who are active, because it's almost like I have to wait for them to come to my door to talk to them, or I have to go to a meeting, and I'll be damned if I'm going to another meeting. So I don't really have that experience very often, but I do definitely see this almost like a kinship with these people. Like, I feel bad that they're still stuck in this, and I wish I could help them out. And I definitely see that cult personality overlaid, over top of their real identities. And I just wish with everything in me I could just crack through that, but it's easier said than done.
I just want to say that I'm so sorry that you lost your family and friends. I lost mine, but it wasn't nearly as bad because I can still talk to them and they won't turn away. And I just want to say I can't even imagine what you've had to go through. I really can't.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I'm actually okay now because I've got family, but my whole goal is to make sure that the next generation does not have to go through this. Right now, I've said this before. Right now, it's 9 p.m. Eastern time, almost. There's a Jehovah's Witness somewhere who's going to bed and laying in bed next to his wife and thinking to himself, I don't believe any of this. And the moment anybody finds that out, I'll lose everything. So I'm doing what I do for their sake so that the next generation doesn't have to experience that,
Well, I want to say cheers to that. And gosh, what a great conversation again, Karen, that you always bring up. You always have the best stories, and that's why I'm always keen on picking you next and letting you come on the show. Thanks again for calling and talking about this.
You're so kind, Dan. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you both tonight.
Of course.
Have a great weekend.
Karen.
Yes, we'll talk to you later. Yeah, Karen has called into the show before. We did a tarot card reading with her one time. I can't remember who was with that was with Courtney Stewart. And if you haven't seen that, you should check that out. That was so fun to do something like that with her. But yeah, she's awesome. She's called in before, and
that's cool.
We just had
that
cool
sounds
times.
Interesting. I think I've only done like tarot cards once or twice. It seems pretty cool though.
Yeah, it's really neat. I do want to get to some more calls, though, because we do have some more people on the line here. I want to go to, let's see, let's do Riley in Washington. I think this is how you pronounce your name, Riley. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Riley says they want to discuss the pedophile cases coming up with Jehovah's Witness leaderships. Is that right?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
All right, yeah, and you got my name right, so don't worry about that.
Cool, cool.
I was really interested if you have any opinion on why it seems that there are a greater number of instances of pedophilia cases in the Organization of Jehovah's Witnesses compared to other religions, especially when you consider that in other religions, a lot of the time that the catch-all excuse that'll be thrown out is generally along the lines of, oh, well, they're committed to celibacy.
Yeah, I can actually speak to that. I don't think that there are necessarily more cases. I think that I looked at the statistics once, and statistically, there are more cases of pedophilia in the Jehovah's Witness religion than in normal society. But I think that the main issue that we have to deal with is the Watchtower Society specifically instructing people not to call the police, to keep things internal and make sure that the elders handle this. It's a judicial matter. It's a sin, not a crime, that kind of thing. That's the main issue. And that is why they've been sued for every penny that they have, because they allowed these pedophiles to move from congregation to congregation without reporting it to the police. And they just continued to reoffend. And for every time they reoffended, they're paying out millions of dollars now. So, they're kind of getting what they deserved. My only issue really is that their solution to the problem isn't to tell people to call the police, isn't to change their 2-witness rule. So there have to be 2 victims before the police are informed or anything is done at all. It's not to fix those problems. It's to put out these little cartoons for kids to say, no, don't do that. That's not an acceptable solution to me. There has to be a systemic change before I'm happy with it. A lot of people say they'd like to see the Watchtower Society just destroyed. I would like that, but I'm a little bit more realistic in hoping for reform instead of destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Just to add on to that, like recently, I think it was the Houston Chronicler and another paper from San Antonio have been doing an investigation with the Southern Baptist Convention, and there's been some cases going on there with some sexual abuse and stuff. And it's easy to look at this and just say this is like a religious thing, but I think it's more along the lines of just a power thing. And an unchecked authority kind of thing. And that this can happen in any kind of organization that has similar kinds of structures that aren't as regulated judicially, outside of the members of the organization. What goes on in these kind of Watchtower Society meetings stays in those Watchtower Society meetings, it seems like, they publish out what they want to publish out. And when you don't have those checks and balances, like you said, I think that's where cases like this happen. I don't know if people who are more inclined to, do terrible things with younger kids flock to these kinds of religious organizations because they see that unchecked power, and so they're more likely to do it, or if it's just a case of something else. But it seems like that's what it is to me. It's an exposure. Not exposure, but an exploitation, if you will, of kind of the flaws in these kinds of systems that don't go checked by people.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're perfectly fine. So is it safe to assume that you'd say that it's somewhat symptomatic of the extremely patriarchal system they've set up, where every man is the absolute be-all, end-all power of his household, where that power could be somewhat going to their heads?
I've been thinking about that. There are a number of possible reasons, and I'm having trouble landing on a solid reason. I have a feeling that it's a mix of a lot of stuff, that being one of it, that being one of the causes. I'm probably going to, that's a good point. I may end up putting something out about that. I'm going to have to think about my ideas on that a little bit more. But it's like, I don't know. It's just a really complicated thing. I'm gonna have to think on it more. I'm sorry.
It is a complicated issue, and I think it's worthy to point out that this doesn't just happen with Jehovah's Witnesses. It happens with lots and lots of these kinds of organizations, and there's still a lot we don't know. There's still a lot we don't know, and of course, there's more and more cases of this stuff coming out each year. My hope, of course, is that more of these cases do come to light, and hopefully the public at large sees these things, and maybe some action will rise there, but who knows? It doesn't happen until we have conversations like this. And by the way, even if I was a Jehovah's Witness, or if I was a Christian, or any other kind of thing, I would want to have these conversations personally. I would feel a personal responsibility to hold people in these powers of, accountable for their actions. But hopefully other people who are in religious faiths and who watch the show also feel the same way. So, interesting topic, Riley. Interesting topic. Do you have anything else you wanted to say before we let you go here?
No, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I'm glad we could have this discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you brought up a great question, and I hope to hear from you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take care. Man, yeah, it makes me sad. It makes me sad talking about this stuff, honestly.
It's heartbreaking. He did make a good point, though. What is the reason? It's at least partly the whole patriarchal system that they have set up, right? I'm really going to have to think on this and figure out why it is that these groups seem to have a disproportionate amount of child abuse in them like that.
It's access too. It's access to like it's the reason why there's a lot of teachers that have these kinds of problems. It's the reason why a lot of people who, if you're working at a summer camp, it's more likely to happen. I remember when I worked at summer camps, it was a heavy topic that we had to talk about, and we had to, set up systems to prepare for. I think, to me, it's just people who want power over people and who will do anything to get that power kind of go towards
gravitate toward that
things. That's my thing. I could be wrong about that, but that's the explanation that makes the most sense to me.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I wish we had more information, more scientific data. It's so hard to get information on that kind of thing. But yeah, I think I agree with you.
Well, let's go ahead and go to another caller here. We have Max from Connecticut. Max is a first-time caller, and he wants to know more about deprogramming extremely religious people, such as Jehovah's Witnesses. Max, are you there?
Yeah, hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. So tell us more about what you wanted to know.
You can hear me, right? I was getting a little skipping around there.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yep.
Okay. So I understand you wanted to talk about deprogramming and things like that, right?
Yeah. I've heard it mentioned multiple times, and especially Telltale's videos.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know if you had any experiences that you'd be able to share with deprogramming a Jehovah's Witness,
right?
Such as coming to a door or something.
Right. I've not had a chance to do it yet, although, like I said, I'm in a new district now, so my house is in a different area. So the Jehovah's Witnesses who are knocking on my door don't know me now for the first time since I got disfellowshipped, basically. So I'm just waiting for the opportunity. But, when I say deprogramming, typically what I'm talking about is street epistemology. There's this whole really good method behind it. It's like, I don't know. It's hard to break down on the spot. Do you have anything to say on it there, Dan?
Well, I am kind of known for having a background in street epistemology a little bit. I have never personally, like you said, I think when it comes down to is people think that you can talk to people and through this sort of one-on-one therapy sessions, you're going to deprogram these people and you're going to make their lives all better. Yeah. You're going to show them the light of reason and things are going to be great. But, generally that's just not the case of how most people get to it. It's a long, drawn-out process that it's going to involve multiple people, multiple sources, especially if people are taking it really seriously and they're really searching things. So I think it is folly to suggest that you can just go up to somebody and there's just this one-stop shop method of just talking to people and suddenly you're going to convince people, because that's just not how people work. People invest themselves in a belief and they benefit from having that belief. You know, like this may sound weird, but there are benefits to being a Jehovah's Witness, even though we talked about some of the not so nice things, but like there is a sense of community. There is a sense of belonging and narrative.
The bad just
and
outweighs
purpose.
the good is
Yeah, and I think you know, there are definitely ways you can look at to kind of help with having conversations more, to make sure that your own personal biases aren't in the way. I would recommend, you know, looking at some street epistemology stuff, going to Anthony Magnabosco's channel as well. He does a lot of videos. Or if you want, check out some of my older conversations on this channel as well, where we're talking to some other callers and stuff about their beliefs. But it's more just a breakdown of figuring out why somebody believes what they do and what they could do to change their mind if circumstances were presented otherwise. On my personal channel on Objectively Dan, I have a video of me breaking down street epistemology as well, which I need to update. I need to do more on. But I would recommend that if we're going to, you know, talk about external sources here.
Yeah, and something else that I want to mention is a lot of the time when cult members hear the term deprogramming, sometimes they think NLP or neuro-linguistic programming, where it's like an instantaneous, like you're using subliminal messaging to pull them out of this idea on the spot, you know, and it's just not like that. It's not like that at all. In fact, Stephen Hassan has talked about his own methods of quote unquote deprogramming, or exit counseling, I think is what he calls it. And it's very different from street epistemology, but even he doesn't use neuro-linguistic programming. Even he has to have multiple sessions. He has to sit down with people for 3 to 5 days at a time sometimes and talk it through with them and bring in research. It's not easy to do. It's just not easy. And it's not something you can do in one sitting. But street epistemology is a good way to kind of come at them and kind of deconstruct their logical fallacies one at a time. So,
thank you. One more question, I think. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Sorry, I'm kind of forgetting.
Oh, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. By the way, I'm actually, I grew up in Connecticut. Just wanted to mention that. It's pretty cool you're from Connecticut.
Oh, where'd you, what town?
I don't know. I don't know. I thought about like saying the town I'm from. I don't know. It's somewhere in the eastern
Probably not good
side.
to dox himself on the camera.
Yeah. Somewhere near the eastern side, I think. So.
Well, Max, we do have some other callers that we do have to get to. But I tell you what, if you want to talk to me more, or I know, you know, Telltale has his Discord and stuff, and we'll plug it at the end. We also have some people.
Discord.
Yeah.
Oh, you are? Cool.
Some people on the chat as well. My email is truth@atheist-community.org, and I'm gonna, you know, plug that again at the other show. If you want to talk to me about it more, and if you're interested in learning some more about street epistemology and stuff, but I think we'll go ahead and go to some other callers if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Also, one more note, Max. You can @ me in the Ask Telltale channel, and we can talk in there. Okay.
All right, sounds good. Have a good day.
All right, we'll see you later.
Too. Thanks.
Yeah, we got some people from Telltale's Discord tonight. What's up, Telltale's Discord people? I'm Objectively Dan. This is Truth Wanted. This is my show. You should subscribe, you know, hit the like button, do the thing, you know, that'll be YouTubers say. I want to go next to Dave, who's, this says he's in Austin, Texas. My first question for you, Dave, is why aren't you here in the ACA studio right now, live in the audience watching this show? But Dave wants to discuss with us about Jehovah's Witness, just kind of religion in general. What's up, Dave?
It's not Dave, it's Dig.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your connection's kind of coming in a little weak.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, getting a little bit of crackle on your end.
Give me 1 sec. I need to find a better connection.
Okay, we can.
Are you fine?
I'm still getting a little bit of a crackle.
Oh, it sounds like it's getting a little bit better. Talk for a second. Say something.
Yeah, just say something real quick.
Oh.
Crackle.
Hello?
Okay, Dave, we'll put you on hold for right now and see if we can work it out with some of our call screeners in the back, maybe. And we're just going to go to somebody else now while we can get that fixed. For now, we'll just go ahead and go to Nicholas, who is in Pennsylvania. Nicholas says he is an atheist in a Baptist family, and he wants to help discussing religion with family without emotions getting out of control on both sides. Don't we all, Nicholas? Don't we all? What's up, man?
Hey, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Awesome. So, so as you actually just mentioned, atheist Baptist family, and it's tough to discuss, religious matters. They're not particularly like fundamental or anything, but it's sorry about that. That was an alarm. It's particularly tough just to not get heated about things. Although I think my parents are really good with it. But yeah, I'd like to discuss that.
Yeah. Have you ever tried discussing it with them? Like, what was the outcome?
Well, I actually have tried multiple times. So, quick story. My deconversion kind of started back in last May. And so I was very open with my parents straight up about like, hey, I have these questions and stuff. And they were helpful about getting me resources. But, I had considered all things. And pretty much by the time I went back to school in like August or whatever was when I was like, I don't think I believe this anymore. And I slowly came out with it, but it was tough, especially for my mom. Because it's emotional, having raised somebody like that and then having it, she said a couple of times that she felt like she failed me. And that hurts me, too.
Nicholas, you're speaking to my heart, dude. I had the same issues with my mom. She told me the same thing, where she felt like that she failed me kind of as a mother, because I ended up not having the belief there. And that hurts, doesn't it? It's the worst.
It does. It makes me feel like, I almost want to believe just for her sake. But I know, like, there's this guy I follow on Twitter that puts it really well, is that, once you kind of go that route of realizing it's not true, you can't go back even in a liberal kind of sense of looking at things. It's like, the Bible isn't completely true, but I still believe. And it's like, I can't get there is what I will tell people.
And that's hard for someone who grew up in the faith to kind of realize that, especially for people who don't have as much experience with like atheists in general and don't really know like how we got to where we are, because most of us, especially if you grew up religious, like it's a journey for most of us. Like it's a hard decision-making thing. Like this wasn't a thing where I just woke up one day and was like, I don't believe this anymore. I'm just gonna, live my life how I want, and if I go to hell, I go to hell. You know what I mean? Like it.
Exactly.
You can't. It's hard to share that with people.
Process.
Yeah. My first instinct would be, for your sake, because you sound kind of close to my age. I would say, and this sounds really bad, but avoid the conversation if you can, if you feel unsafe about it. Like that's my first thing, is the concerns. Like if you're in a position where you feel like you are going to be, kicked out of your home, or your parents aren't going to support you financially or in some other way, then I would say, like, avoid the topic. And I know that's hard to hear because we want to talk about this. Like, this is really interesting to us. But your safety always comes first in these things.
Certainly. And thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. My second thing to you would be, if you do feel like you want to talk to people about this, I would do one-on-one conversations first. I wouldn't involve multiple people, because you don't want to feel ganged up on, and you don't want to make, you want to make somebody feel uncomfortable, like one person at a time, right? This is something that you go out to dinner with your mom with, and you talk with, and it's probably going to be more than one conversation, and just invite her to ask questions about where you're at. Make yourself as open as possible to her and say, like, look, do you want to know where I'm at, or do you want to, like, don't focus on the arguments on whether or not this is true so much, and like the particular evidences and the historical references or things like that. I would say start with the emotional healing first, because she sounds like she's hurt by this. She's hurt that you were hiding this from her in some way, even though you really had no choice but to hide it because you knew about the consequences. But I know that was the initial reaction I got from my mother. And just know that, your relationship with your parents is going to be a little bit different, and you can't take that back. It's already happened. You got to rip the Band-Aid off. I know, you think about experiences of people in the LGBTQ community, who are coming out to them.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you know, I know it's hard for a parent to kind of accept that, but I wouldn't want my kid to feel like they're trapped in the closet. I would want my kid to want to express that to me and talk about that with me. And I think your parents probably feel the same way. They probably want to feel like they want to talk to you about it. Unless they're having doubts of their own, which might complicate things. But anyway, that's my first initial advice. I mean, I'm sure you have some advice on this as well.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe try to come at the conversation in a calm, rational way and be willing to give ground, and be willing to take grounds, kind of the street epistemology approach to it maybe. Try to keep the emotions low. That would be my best advice. Of course, I don't know where you are in your relationship with your parents or your family more generally, but that's how I would go at it. Try that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you a ton, because that really is helpful. And, you know, where I'm at with them is that we're pretty good, but some things that you were both saying really helpful in the sense of, you know, keeping kind of a cool head about it all and not letting the emotions getting too high there.
Yeah.
It's helpful. They're really accepting. Like, I do feel safe talking to them about this, but like you were just saying, having multiple people like in the conversation, like with both of my parents, you know, that's just gonna, it's signing up for disaster right from the very start. Of like, well, yeah, group discussions are tough.
Oh yeah. And here's another thing too, you know, this is a surprise to them. They don't know what this has been like for you for the past, I'm going to assume, few years or so. You know, and so the narratives they might be conjuring up in their mind might be a bit more spiteful. They might think that they're hiding this because you are holding something against them, or there was something personally that you felt offended by them or something. And you and I know the truth. That you and I know that's not the case. I know that where you're at, you just really wanted to know the truth, and this is where you're at. And I think just reminding them and just focusing more on the personal experiences rather than just here's the evidence, I'm going to be super rational about this, take it or leave it, because, you know, we like to posture sometimes like that in the atheist community, but when it comes to talking to our friends and family, you can't always start off that way. You know, you got to start from just where your relationship is at and kind of build from there. And I promise you this, Nicholas, it gets better. It will get better. It's going to be hard. Yeah. It's going to suck. It's going to be the worst thing ever, but it's going to get better. I promise you that.
And listening to stuff like this, you know, you guys, and then I watch a lot of Telltale's videos and all sorts of stuff like that. It really does help with that kind of sense of, I guess you might call it camaraderie, just being able to know that there's more people going through this. And you're right, it does get better. And I'm definitely aware of that. And that knowing that has made pretty much the entire difference. I don't know where I would be if I would thought I was going through it on my own.
Yeah, I have so many. I'm looking at some of my friends right here in the audience here in the studio now. I'm looking at Telltale here. I mean, like, there's so many great people in this community that you can talk to and just be so open about that just won't judge you and will understand where you're at. And I hope that you find more people. I'm assuming you're on Telltale's Discord and stuff. If you're not, definitely get plugged in there or in the ACA Discord as well. And be with some other people to talk about this because it's such an interesting thing when you find other people and you're like, oh, man, I felt this way too. And if you want, my email, again, it's truth@atheist-community.org. Send me an email, man. I want to know what's going on in your situation. And if you want more help from me, you're more than welcome to contact me on there.
All right. Thank you a ton. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Well, Nick, I hope this was helpful. And yeah, man, just let me know how it goes. And I'm sure some other people would want to know about it. Maybe if you want to call back sometime in the future and kind of talk about how some of those conversations would go, I think that'd be a great thing to talk about.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'll plug in. I actually subscribed to your channel just a little bit ago. So good stuff. We got another one. All right. Cool. Thanks, Nick. We'll talk to you later. Talk to you later.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't know. Like, usually when I talk to people who watch my stuff, I'm not on camera, and I got this stupid shit-eating grin on my face because people are, telling me they watch my channel and everything. It's just awesome. I don't usually get this much attention. I feel like a popular girl in high school for the first time. It's crazy. You're the prettiest girl at the prom. I know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I'm lucky because I get to be surrounded by people like yourself who are making great content and stuff on YouTube. I'm just hosting the show here.
You're making me smile again. Here
it's
it comes.
fun, man. No, I mean, like, it is rewarding a little bit to know that. I mean, part of the reason I started this was to give a safe place for conversations for people about this stuff, because I know that that's what I wanted when I was in that place in my life. And gosh, just to see how much progress I've made in my life even since then, and even the other content creators on YouTube and the people I've talked to in this community, it's really inspiring. And hey, like, there are still Christians and all kinds of other people that we talk to that are in this community too. And that's even more wild, because it's like, oh, here's a perspective on Christianity I never even knew growing up. Maybe this is true. We have to kind of investigate it and talk about it. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun.
It definitely is. I love talking to people about this stuff. It is a lot of fun. You're right. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I do this every night or every Sunday, but this is actually a lot more in depth. We talk to people for longer and everything, so it's really nice.
Yes, for sure. Well, we still got 2 more callers on the line. I want to get to both of them before we head out tonight. Let's go back to Dave. And Dave, let's see if your audio problems have gotten any better. Can you hear us, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, can you speak a little bit more? Hello, Dave, are you there?
Hear him.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we're still getting a little bit of crackle on your end. Can you just keep talking just a little bit more to see if we can get that fixed?
I don't know what to do. Do you hear me well?
We can hear you, but I'm not going to lie, the audio is a little bit bad.
Here, let me, I think my headphones, let me disconnect from them.
Okay, Dave, well, don't worry. We're going to go. Oh, well, he ended on the call. All right, well, that's all right. We still got one more caller here on the line. This is what happens. It's a live show. Stuff goes wrong. You just kind of take it at stride. We're going to go instead to Cody in Minnesota. And Cody wants to discuss a position on reproduction. This is kind of interesting. We've kind of talked about this before. Now we get to have Telltale's take. It says he thinks that that it's wrong to kind of reproduce. Okay, like I guess there's an ethical wrong for us to reproduce and that we shouldn't reproduce anymore. Am I straw-manning you here, Cody? Is that what you want to talk about?
Well, to be most accurate, I'd word it. I think it's more wrong to reproduce, or at least more potentially wrong to reproduce than it is not to.
Okay, can you kind of tell us a bit more about why you think that?
Yeah, well, okay, so to start, when you, okay, so first of all, there's,
Cody, you there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, so basically,
yeah, let me ask you this. So you're saying that you feel like it's more wrong to reproduce than not to reproduce, right? That's kind of your position?
Yes. Yes.
Where is it, like, what brought you to that conclusion? Why do you feel that way? What's your position on it exactly?
Okay, so there's really no way to tell for sure. Like, let's say you were to create a new life, like a new human, and bring it into life. There's no way to know for sure what kind of life or how good or bad their life will be. Like, before they're born, like, there is no pain or suffering or anything like that, and there's also no need or want or desire for anything else. So it's basically there's like basically nothing wrong with not coming into life, but there could definitely be some like wrong or badness in coming to life. Like, for
all you know, someone could basically lead a life that is, you know, that's to them what they would perceive as not really worth living, or that's torturous in some way, or something like that, you know, and there, you know, is no guarantee of, you know, of a lasting happiness. And sure, there might be some, you know, happy or good moments, but there's also like a lot that could potentially go wrong or bad in someone's life.
Yeah, you know, this kind of makes me think of, you know, you see posts on the internet sometimes, maybe on Reddit, of like, I don't know, somebody is kind of, let's say, trashy. I don't want to be judgmental, but, you know, what would colloquially be defined as a trashy situation, you know, people having like some sort of shotgun wedding at a really young age, and they're kind of in a poor economic situation, and you kind of look at the pregnant woman and you think, oh man, you know, what kind of life is that kid going to have, or something? You know, that's kind of what this idea makes me think of is, okay, is there an ethical kind of harm being done to bringing people into life? And, you know, it's been talked about on the show on here. I don't know if I really have a position on it either way. I mean, like, I guess you could just not have kids personally, you know, but I don't know if I would go as far as to say that we should stop other people from having kids. I think that's kind of infringing on, you know, the rights of other people.
Oh yeah, I don't think we should like force.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we should like force that necessarily. Like, I'm not saying like there should be like a law or whatever.
Okay.
For one, that'd be crazy, because they would never even make that law, because, you know, they want to have, you know, a functional, you know, society or whatever. And if like the, you know, limit to, you know, how many kids you could reproduce was like 0, then, you know, there would, you know, that would just be like the opposite of what, you know, their goals are. But
all right, let me ask you this then. So you're saying that we can't. It doesn't sound like you're saying that we should enforce anything or force anybody to do this thing or that thing. This is more of like a philosophical discussion more than a legal discussion, right? So here's the one thing that I would want to ask about this is life preferable to no life? Ultimately, if somebody is alive, do we want to preserve that life, for example? It's a little bit of a different situation, but it really comes down to the core of the question, right? Is life preferable to no life?
Well, not necessarily. Like, when it comes to the question in general, is life preferable to no life? Not necessarily, you know, but like when you're asking, like, you know, now that someone's alive, like if they're already alive and, you know, they're here, and, you know, would you want to preserve that life? It kind of depends on the situation, I suppose. Like, because like when they're already out, like, you know, already like a fully developed, you know, person, and, you know, they've had experiences.
They've got emotions and thoughts and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you know, like up to them whether or not, you know, or at least it should be more up to them, you know, if possible, you know, whatever, you know, whether they
survive or not.
But in general, like I don't think life is necessarily, just in general, preferable to no life. There's like, you know, for example, if like no life ever existed in the universe, like, would that be wrong or bad? I don't think so. Like, I don't see why it would be necessary.
From my point of view, there wouldn't be anybody to say that it's wrong or bad in the first place. Like, there wouldn't be anybody to be making ethical or moral judgments at that point. So to me, the question almost seems kind of meaningless, you know, if we're talking about no life in the universe at all. But yeah, it is an interesting question, although I don't know if, unless we're talking about rules and establishing a society, you know, like unless we're talking about enforcement of what we as people can and can't do, it almost just doesn't seem like, you know, a really good question to talk about in that sense, because at that point it's almost just kind of speculation. You know what I mean? I can definitely see where the kind of anti-natalist view comes into play, and why people feel like for themselves they want to make that personal decision and say, I don't want to bring any more life that could potentially be harmed into this world. I want to help take care of the people that are already here, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, when it comes to enforcement on that kind of stuff, I think you already know this, Cody. Like, yeah, that's you know, it would be really, really unrealistic from my point of view. The people have a strong desire to want to reproduce and start families, and especially you can look at across national boundaries and see the predictor rate of what kinds of people are willing to have children versus others. And of course, as you know, probably in the United States and in Europe and other places where people have generally a higher source of income, there's less children because people, well, they just don't want to have kids as much. That's just kind of their situation. And then with the lower income situations, when you look at those in other countries, there's people with more kids. And that's where you might find the most kinds of suffering in a lot of those places. You know, of course, poor economic conditions are more likely to affect the way that you live your life and suffer and whatnot. So it's an interesting thought. I just don't know what else I could really say about it, you know?
Yeah, and I get like wanting to have kids and having a family and stuff, but why create more kids that will need, you know, a home and loving family when there are already kids out there, like, you know, orphans and stuff that are waiting to be adopted? You know,
that's a position like I personally hold myself. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but my girlfriend and I have talked about this. We've said, like, you know, if we ever wanted to have kids, which we currently is not something we're interested in, that we would really seriously want to adopt, because I actually feel the same way as you do.
That's a tough question, actually. I see what you're getting at there. I think that if we're talking generally, like if we're leaving adoption out of it, if we're talking just continuing the human species or not continuing the human species, I think that that question is generally amoral. It's outside of morality, kind of. There isn't, you know, you can't really bring morality into it because humans wouldn't be there to judge it as a moral thing. Generally, I think that I just holds this to be self-evident. I think that humanity existing is preferable to humanity not existing. And that includes having babies. Well, I mean, there are plenty of kids that are, you know, can adopt, and we could discuss that for sure. But reproducing generally, I don't personally think that it's bad. But you've definitely given me something to think about there for sure. I've got a lot to think about walking away from this show.
That's the best answer you can give. It's, I don't know, but you've given me something to think about. If we get one of those, then we know we've had a good show. So I really appreciate you calling in, Cody. Thanks for bringing us an interesting subject to talk about.
Yeah. And, oh, wait, I have one more thing, one more little input to give on this.
Very, very quickly. Let's hear it.
Okay, so this is just really hypothetical, but suppose that there is an afterlife, where a place where you'll spend all eternity. You don't necessarily know whether it's going to be good or bad. You know, maybe you'll be bad, and by bringing someone into life, you know, they will eventually die, and then let's say they go to an afterlife, like a hell. Like, you know, I personally don't believe that there is, but, you know, especially for those that do believe, though, but, like, you know, you say that it's better to have, like, humans in life and stuff, but is it really, would it be really, like, if, let's say, just hypothetically, if there was an afterlife, you know, would you still think the same way?
Man, That's an extra complicator. It depends on the afterlife. Depends on what that is and what version, you know, because there's so many different versions of what we could talk about here. And unless we had a specific, you know, idea of what that was like, I couldn't give an answer either way. What do you think, Telltale?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. It's a complicated question. It's like, I guess if we just took the colloquial, common, standard idea of heaven, it would seem at face value that just going straight to heaven would be the best thing, right? But as humans, we're programmed to want to extend life, and it's disgusting to us, the idea of ending a life. So I think that there's really no other way to appeal to this but from the emotional side, really, right? I mean, the logical side just is not, it doesn't end well, it seems, for humanity.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an excellent point. Well, Cody, thanks again for giving us something to think about, and we'll hope to hear from you again soon. Yeah. Cool stuff.
Really fascinating, yeah.
I did say, Telltale, that was the last caller, but we actually snuck in a few more here before the end. And hopefully, I was hoping you could stay on a bit longer so we could clear it out.
Tell you what, I can stay for 10 more minutes. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. We have somebody here. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I have the name here as Abu Yusuf. From Buffalo. I could be wrong. You are a theist, and you want to ask me specifically, and I guess Telltale too, why I believe atheism is true. Is that right? And please tell me how to pronounce your name.
It's Abu Yusuf.
Okay, Abu Yusuf, thank you. Kind of expand on that question for me a bit.
So basically, yeah, I stumbled across you guys a couple of months back and finally got a chance today to call in. So I just wanted to kind of examine your beliefs as to why you believe a God does not exist, if that's actually what you believe, and also if you can define God.
Okay. Tal, do you want to tackle this one first?
Yeah, sure.
Or,
let's see if I can take a crack at it.
Because we might have different answers to this question. I think we might have different positions. So,
okay, we shall see.
Yeah.
I'm not like, okay, so anybody who presents a God to me, they have to prove to me that their God exists. A Muslim person has to prove to me that their God exists. A Christian person has to prove to me that their God exists. Pagans have to prove that Thor exists. I'm not making any claims about anything. I'm letting people come to me with claims and tell me whether or not they think it's true. And I evaluate the evidence and accept their claim that God is real or reject the claim. I'm not making a counterclaim of my own that he is not real. So far, everybody who's presented a God to me, Jehovah's Witnesses and Muslims and anybody who has presented one so far, I've rejected the idea that they are correct about their claim.
Yeah, that's interesting. This is how I would kind of reflect on this question. Excuse me. You know, I was born at one point, and then at some point I became a Christian at a very young age. So I believed in at least a version of Christianity. What started off as Methodist, kind of starting Baptist a bit. So like that was my belief, and the belief in that kind of version of God. And eventually I got to a point where I rejected that specific version of that God. So like that specific concept, the one that I previously had, is one that I reject. And so now I find myself at a point where I lack any beliefs in any particular God. So I'm open to the idea of God's being there. And I definitely don't go so far. I know some people do. I've thought about it myself, but I don't go as far as to say that, like, I know for a fact that there aren't any gods or no conceptions of God possible. But in this sense, because you did ask me to define God, I'm only specifically talking about the God that I once had a particular belief in, and that being, you know, the specific orthodoxy of my Christianity. Are there other kinds of gods? Is there a Christianity that's actually real? There could be. I don't know of it yet, though. I don't exactly recognize that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so Yeah, kind of. So addressing, I'm sorry, what was his name again?
This is Telltale Atheist, and I am Objectively Dan.
Right. So the first guy, so how would you define proof? Like, what kind of proof are you actually looking for? Is it a scientific evidence? Are you looking for some future experiment?
I don't really know. I don't know what I'm looking for. You know, honestly, I'm not looking for anything. I'm just sitting here waiting for proof to come. And if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I figure God knows what proof it would require for me to believe. I think Matt Dillahunty says that. So yeah, once God gives me that proof, I'll accept it.
You see, that's one of the things I've actually heard that before, and I kind of find that interesting, because if you don't know what you're actually looking for, how do you know you're not completely missing it? Or, you know, it could be right in front of your face, and you don't know what you're looking for, so how would you ever find it? You know what I mean? So there has to be a certain criteria for evidence. So when you reject something by saying that I don't have proof for it, how would you define that criteria or proof, right? Does that make sense or no?
I understand what you're. I understand where you're going. It's not really my forte. I mean, you know, this whole debating kind of structure, but I will say that I can't think of another situation in which that logic holds up, where we need to define proof for every single thing that we don't believe in before we decide not to believe in it. So generally, I'm just going to sit here, and if somebody brings me evidence and I feel that the evidence is compelling enough to believe something, anything at all, unicorns, then I'll believe in unicorns if they present that evidence. Otherwise, I'm not going to give it a second thought to what evidence I would need for unicorns. Doesn't matter to me.
So you're actually looking for a direct observation. You want to see something in the sky. And so
I don't, not necessarily. I would be, I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know what it would take. Maybe God could just tell me, just put it in my head, and that would be all I need. I don't know. That may or may not work.
So let's say if you hear something in your head, how would you actually know that's God? I guess that's my question.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Sorry? So how would I know that it's God and not like a mental disorder or something, for example? Is that what you're getting at?
Right. Yeah, this, like, I've kind of had this conversation before, and I wanted to get your input on this. So, and feel free to ask me any questions if you want, like, you know, because I know it's a two-way conversation. So that's where I would try to get to the bottom of the epistemology of atheists, and actually why they reject something. Because by rejecting something, I would say it's actually, although they're not making any counterclaims by rejecting evidence, but they need some reason as to why they reject something. So if someone says, I don't know, and I would ask them, why don't you know? You know, is it you don't know because you know, you don't care, or you don't know because it's something unknowable?
Well, it seems to me that we're equating outright rejection that God exists and rejection of the evidence that I've been presented so far. And also we're equating rejection of God in general and claiming that God does not exist. So if you're, say, a Christian and you come to me with evidence and the evidence is piss poor, I'm just going to say that that does not prove it to me. I'm open to believing that God exists. That's okay with me. But I need more than what you have here. So bring me more and I will believe it. I'm not saying this evidence is piss poor. For that reason, God does not exist. There is a difference to be had there, logically speaking. So, well, yeah, I'm rejecting the evidence I've seen so far is the bottom line.
That's a good take. I want to kind of redirect it a little bit. I want to try to answer I was questioned a bit about the knowing if there's a voice in our head whether it was God or not. And then I'd love to ask some questions to you if that's all right with you. But
yeah, sure.
To answer that question, I think it's an interesting one. I want to assume for a second that I'm talking about somebody else that's telling me that they're having voices in my head instead of myself, because I think the answer to that might be two different things. But let's say somebody else is telling me that they're hearing voices in their head and they're saying that it's God. Well, I would first want to look at, okay, are there natural explanations for this phenomenon? Can we find evidence of this happening in other people? And I think unequivocally right now, yes, we can all say that people can definitely claim that they've heard things in their head that aren't actually those things, right? We can know that because they all say different things and they all kind of contradict each other. So I think we can kind of start there and say, okay, well, at least one of those people is lying, right? At least one of those people isn't talking about reality. So I think then we can ask ourselves the question of, okay, well, what can we find to be true and what can we find not to be true? And, you know, there have been explanations of why people had voices in their head. I mean, you and I know that there are people who've said that there are demons being taking over their bodies and making them do all of these crazy things. And the more that we've studied psychology and neuroscience, we've found out that certain things are happening in the brain when these phenomenons are happening. And in fact, we've never observed a phenomenon usually like this where we haven't observed something in the brain. As far as I know, I've never heard of somebody that has, you know, at least particularly, and this gets kind of complicated, but we can basically look at people with like Alzheimer's, for example, and we can know for without actually meeting the person or ever talking to the person that they have Alzheimer's or at least symptoms of Alzheimer's because their brain structures are different from typical people, neurotypical people who, you know, have never experienced those phenomena. So already we can point to some sort of evidence there that is distinguishing ourselves from the norm. So I think if we were looking at the God question and we were saying, well, what is this voice in my head and is it a God? I'd have to say, well, does it act like a God? Does it do things like a God? Is there something there that we can point to that says, hey, this is a God? Because if there's just a voice in my head and it's just talking to me and nothing else in my reality is doing anything, then I might be inclined to say that there's just something wrong with my head. And, you know, we can check that out. We can get an X-ray. We can look at that and see if it's pointing, if we are looking at the same evidence that we're seeing for other kinds of, you know, natural phenomenon.
Okay. So it's not really, even when you hear, you know, you get a really powerful personal experience, even that you're willing to dismiss. So I guess what evidence is there that would make you believe 100% that there is a creator? You know, something like that.
Yeah, I
because
mean,
any evidence, I would say anyone can dismiss. So is that really, you know, is it correct to be skeptical about everything?
Yeah, you know, I'm almost more inclined to say explanations are more powerful to me in this case than evidence, because I think, like Telltale said, you know, that's a big question, and there may be kinds of evidences out there that could convince me of that. But more so, I would just need explanations, because the things that I know about the world, the things that I know to be true, that I've seen in my experiences that I can test, seem to tell us their own kind of story. You know, atoms seem to work in their own particular way. And whether or not there's a big why question mark reason for that, I don't know. But what I can know is that these things are already happening the way that they are, and we can make predictions and we can make guesses and estimations based off that. So if there's a system that can accompany observations outside of the natural world, I'd be interested to know. But I don't know. That's maybe that's not the answer you're looking for, but that's all I'd have to say. I mean, did you have anything more to say on that, Telltale? Or?
Yeah, actually, let me just make one more note here. You said even when personal experience is really strong, we reject it. Personally, I mean, I can't speak for Dan, but personal experience is not reliable at all. It's like the worst form of evidence in any situation. DNA evidence in court beats out like personal experience or eyewitness in most cases. I don't think that I'd want personal experience. I would want hard evidence. I want facts. I want information that can be reproduced and tested generally. That's my standard of evidence, not for God, but for things more generally. So
I would actually say that personal experience is probably the strongest of all evidences. So I would divide evidences in like probably 4 or 5 different categories. And so one is a scientific evidence. You know, you do the observation testing and all that stuff. Second would be something like a logical evidence, deduction, induction. Third would be a valid testimonial evidence, which basically means a valid testimony. It's not.
Is this?
It's pretty strong. I mean, I would say it's a very common form of evidence because, for instance, I believe the Earth is spherical in shape, not because I've actually observed it myself. You know, I've never been in space, but I believe the multiple millions of valid testimonial evidences of scientists, of pictures and videos. And
I don't believe testimonials on that. I don't base my belief that the Earth is round off of testimonials at all. The thing that really clenches it for me, the thing that clenches it for me is the fact that we can take one stick and put it in the ground in New York, put another stick in the ground in South America somewhere, Bolivia, and we can measure the shadows, do a little bit of trigonometry, and figure out the circumference of the Earth that way. We have empirical evidence that it is round. I don't want personal testimony from anybody about anything generally in my life.
Right, but this is just one example. I mean, not every person has conducted that experiment. I know that there are some certain experiments you can carry out yourself to come to that true belief, but majority of the 99% of the people living on planet Earth believe the Earth is spherical in shape, not because they've been in space or they've actually observed it physically with their own eyes. It's just the multiple accounts of pictures, videos that have been shown to us.
But it's not just accounts, though. I think there's a difference there because we could take all of those accounts away and I and Telltale could still figure out something to be true. Whereas if we're talking about the typical Christian, and I don't know what your experience is, but if we're talking about some God experience, I would have no way of knowing about any other kind of God experience unless I ask somebody else about their experience or unless that experience happened to me. And if that experience isn't happening to me, then I just have no way to access that. There's a little bit of a subtle difference there. Do you see what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, therefore I use the word valid testimonial. It has to be someone reliable, like a scientist. It's not some...
Okay, so what makes a scientist reliable over anybody else? Like what makes testimonial valid instead of not?
So consistency of, with multiple peer-reviewed, so multiple scientists accepting that scientist to be a scientist. So that's one evidence of that scientist being reliable. I would say that that's one evidence. So, if you read books and, why do you rely on books? I mean, because they've been, I don't know where I was going with that, but you see what I'm saying, right? With the scientists.
Yeah. I think I see what you're getting at. I think so let me clarify, see if I can get an idea of where you're at. Peer review, you said peer review. So people who see this person and the work that they're doing in the field and accepting or going through their experiments, testing them and seeing that they're valid experiments and that they did it correctly and it's reproducible and all that stuff. That's what lends credibility to somebody, right?
Right, generally accepted, not just scientists, even historians. So, why do we accept certain things in history? How do we know Darwin existed or Genghis Khan existed? Because there are historians that have documented this, and these are all very, well-documented things that it would be almost like it would tantamount to a huge conspiracy theory to suggest otherwise. Like some people come up with theories like Jesus didn't exist or something like that, or Moses didn't exist. So I would say these are all conspiracy theories because they're going against the majority or the widely accepted historical accounts of these things.
Okay. I think that where I sit with it, I don't know about Jesus existing or any of that other stuff, but I think that where I sit with it is if we can get the evidence together and take an objective look at it and figure it out, then I would be a lot happier with that than taking somebody's word for it, no matter how credible this person happens to be or appears to be or is purported to be. I'd rather look at the evidence in front of me and go from there. I consider evidence, I consider empirical evidence better than personal testimony by far, any day of the week on any subject.
Now, is that true for every true belief that you hold?
Probably not. There's something I'm sure that violates that rule, but generally speaking, I think I prefer that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it violates one rule, I guess it is permissible. So you trust. So you believe that your parents are your true biological parents, based on valid testimonial evidence or pictures or whatever. So
nope, I have my birth certificate.
Yeah, well,
I have the birth certificate, and I got it from the courthouse. They provided it to me and stamped it. So that's pretty solid evidence, reasonable evidence. I don't need to get a DNA test done, but there is no absolute perfect way of knowing. It's possible the DNA test was faked if I did get one done.
Right.
So
even the certificate is actually a testimonial evidence. It's not a scientific, empirical evidence.
I think we're going a little bit in the weeds with it. There is a line somewhere where you have to say that's a little bit too far, and knowing where that line is very difficult for each specific thing.
Let me try to redirect the conversation here just a little bit. This is an interesting topic that we're talking about here. We're talking about like principles of verification, basically. How can we know something is true and not true? Yeah, kind of an epistemology thing. Can I ask you, Abu, like, is the reason why you believe in a God, is it because of empirical evidence? Is that what convinces you? Is it testimony? Is it a combination of the two? What is it that gets you going with your belief?
It's a combination of a lot of things, actually. So scientific evidence, when you say that, when you use that term scientific evidence, I'm thinking in my head, the scientific method where you observe, when you make a hypothesis and you do the testing, verification, and all that stuff.
It's not the only scientific evidence, so that's just a scientific method. Evidence and the scientific method are different from each other.
Yeah, so I'm just categorizing it, as a scientific or empirical evidence. The second would be, like I was saying, logical evidence is a very powerful one. Induction, deduction, or induction would be actually scientific, but deduction or abduction, which is inference to the best explanation. And we use this on a daily basis. It's something even scientists use, inference to best explanation. And third would be valid testimonial evidence. And the fourth would be intuitive or, personal experience. Although the last one is actually subjective. It's completely subjective, but I would say that's probably the strongest. And Rene Descartes' meditation, or, his theory, or, I can think, therefore I exist, is actually a completely subjective, personal evidence. It has nothing to do with, it's something that you are feeling yourself. So even if you were a brain in a vat somewhere, you still exist. And that's a completely subjective thing. And that's something we know 100%. So there you go. That's one example of something that's completely subjective and it's 100% true.
Well, I'm kind of confused. Did you say, though, that our intuitions are our strongest evidence?
I would say personal experience.
Okay, but I'm kind of confused because you're laying down this hierarchy, but it's actually going in reverse. You're saying personal experiences are the most reliable and scientific evidence is the least reliable? Is that how it's being ranked here?
Yeah, I didn't say it in any particular order. Okay. I'm just going down the list.
Why do you think that personal experience is the most reliable method of knowing things?
Because if you experience something, let's say if I experience something tomorrow morning, if I see something in the sky, and if I see it every day of my life at the same time, and I'm doing all the things in my head. I'm doing, is this real? I'm pinching myself and all these things, and I would say it's probably the strongest because you cannot deny what you're seeing. Really, it might be something it might be not even real, but you're still experiencing it, right? So your personal experiences are the strongest. Although in a discussion like this, I wouldn't even use that, you know, as an evidence for believing in the one true God or something like that.
So tell me how the personal experience, because, well, no, this is really interesting to me because you're saying that the personal experience is evidence for God. And I'm wondering if you would find personal experiences of, let's say, someone of a Hindu faith being evidence for, you know, their kinds of gods.
It could be, but I personally wouldn't use it.
Why not?
Because it's subjective. It doesn't.
Well, wait. What makes their experiences of God subjective and your experiences not as subjective?
No, I'm saying mine would be subjective. So even mine would be subjective. So there's no point in bringing that up in a discussion like this. You know?
I'm confused though, because you're saying that it was good evidence, right? Or am I misunderstanding you?
Well, not in a discussion. Not when we're talking about objective evidences. If I'm talking to a second person, a third person, I wouldn't use my subjective feelings or experiences as an evidence. Because it doesn't, I mean, the other guy would be like, you know, that's unfalsifiable. So, you know, there's no point mentioning anything at all.
But you're also saying
it
it's
is
the best.
Usable. Yeah, I mean, you're saying in other circumstances it is acceptable?
Sorry?
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just wondering because I'm kind of hearing you say it's the best evidence, but you're also saying it's not worth bringing up with other people. So I'm kind of confused. Wouldn't it be bad evidence if we can't actually use it to demonstrate anything to be true?
I would say it's probably the strongest, but probably not the most reliable in the sense that you cannot really test it or verify it. But just because it's unverifiable doesn't make it false.
I agree with you that
there are many things.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Just because we can't personally verify something doesn't mean that it's not true. Like I could say there's a red car parked outside, and that could totally be true. But like I just have no real reason of knowing that to be true, and it could just be true by happenstance. But I'm just wondering if we can't really use it to demonstrate things with other people, and if we can't use it as kind of an objective evidence for other people to observe, why should I find the personal experiences of other people to be convincing at all?
Well, you don't have to. I mean, I wouldn't put that on my list when I'm trying to, you know, lay down my evidences as to why I believe or why I'm a theist.
Okay. Well, why should we? Okay, let me rephrase that then. So why should, like, instead of the experiences of other people, why should I think my own personal experiences are any more, you know, reliable or useful?
Because it's something you're experiencing yourself. Like I would say that's a really strong feeling you have that's unfalsifiable. Like you cannot, you know, unless I mean you can doubt it if you want, but
I don't know, because okay, I hear this from like, you know, people who are racists who say, yeah, I've experienced like black people or something, and they'll say something like, oh yeah, all the ones I've seen have this behavior and do this thing, and you know, based on my personal experiences, I think this judgment about this group of people is true, and I would say that that's a really bad way of judging a situation, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's, you know, in that example, of course.
Mm-hmm. So why should we, like, you know, assume any other situation is different?
In what other situation? What do you mean?
Well, like religious experiences, for example.
Right.
Like I could say, oh, I went to this meditation thing, and you know, I felt this thing really happening to me, and you know, I really believe in chakras now because I think my chakras were kind of doing something when I was doing this meditation experience.
Okay, I mean, you can just tell them good for you, I guess. I'm not gonna sit there and be like, okay, that's not what you experienced. You know, well, it doesn't really help. Like I said, in a conversation or discussion, like I know you guys like to stick on that personal experience thing because it's really.
Hold on, a question for you real quick.
Well, let's let him finish real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep.
But I would just use the first three for my belief in theism, or you know, I believe there's only one God. So I would say logical evidence, valid testimonial evidence, and empirical evidence would be something that I observe. So the beginning of the universe, for instance, is an empirical. We have some empirical data of of this phenomena that took place. So I use that. That's the data that I have. That's a good information for me. It's not something I'm gonna reject. And then I use logic, obviously, that if this universe did begin to exist, is there a cause behind it, or is it something that caused itself? Is it absolute? Is it a possibility that absolute nothingness caused the universe? That's so all these things. When I go down the list, the conclusion that I come to is that whatever caused this universe has to be something that exists eternally. It is uncaused, because if you keep going back, you've probably heard of the infinite regress. So if this universe has a cause, which is also caused, if you keep going back, you actually would never. It's a paradox. It's an infinite regress. It's a logical impossibility.
Well,
and universe coming into existence from nothingness is a mathematical impossibility. So the only thing that I can think of, is that whatever caused this universe has to be something that exists eternally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, I can see where you can make a conclusion like that. Unfortunately, we're kind of running out of time here. We're kind of past the 2-hour mark, and it's a little later than I would like it to be. And this is a conversation that obviously needs a lot more depth. So I want to encourage you to contact me if you want, truth@atheist-community.org, or go to the ACA Discord, the Atheist Community of Austin Discord, and definitely talk to people there. I'm sure there's some people in the chat who want to talk more. And if you want to call back next week so we can talk about it a bit more, or any week after that, I love that. Unfortunately, I want to try to wrap things up here and kind of end the show. But I really, really do appreciate the call, and I'm so happy that you're supporting the show by calling, and I want to thank you for that.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you next time. Okay, we do have one more caller that I want to get to. This is Dig in Austin, and we're just going to try to wrap this up in just a few minutes. I'm sorry, Dig. We're kind of running out of time here. You're on the air with us right now. What's up, Dig?
Hey, everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
I was actually Dave from the last 2 calls. It was those dang headphones that were ruining everything.
Okay, somebody wrote Dig here on the notes. I don't know why they did that, but this is Dave. You've been trying to contact us all night. We finally got you here, and you sound great, Dave. What's up?
What is up? I've been waiting to call you guys.
Yeah, I know. Well, unfortunately, we only have a few minutes left here, and I'm really sorry about that, but I definitely want to get your question in.
I wanted to tell you both of this. A few weeks ago, I think, me and my mom and my dad were discussing plans about me spending the 5 days with my aunt who lives up in Ohio, and while we were having the discussion, my dad brought up that she became a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh. So your aunt became a Jehovah's Witness, you say?
Yes.
Oh, that's a shame. How did that happen?
So summer last year, my Catholic grandmother passed away, and yes, we were all very sad. Hey, at least my grandma didn't shove Catholicism down my throat.
Right.
And then half a year later, my aunt was still trying to cure her depression, and that's when some Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on her door, and yeah, the rest is history.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. And she's a mother of 4, and none of her 4 kids wanted to be Jehovah's Witness like her. So they're living with the oldest of the cousins. Well, there's 3. One of them is at the army right now, but the second oldest one is taking care of the 2 younger ones. And Amy's, my aunt's living by my own.
and I remember I brought it up with my papa, who is my grandfather, and at that time we just drove by a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witness, and my heart just dropped. That was actually the first time I saw one, and we were heading to Louisiana for the trip for the weekend, and I had to go to a non-denominational church where I got to see my papa be baptized. Yeah, even though I'm not really in Christianity, it's something that I can't miss out. It's my family. Most of them are Christian. And I got to talk with the preacher the next day, and I brought up Jehovah's Witnesses, and he said he had a friend of his who's a relative of a friend of his is a Jehovah's Witness, and and this is a Baptist guy, and he was surprised about their standards, and he would consider them a cult.
Yeah, they definitely are. I know that when I was, before I was born, actually, my mom and my dad were both in the military. They were in the Air Force, and they ended up splitting up, and then they ended up, my mom had her door knocked on by some Jehovah's Witnesses. She was kind of distraught, you know, had 2 kids, single, divorced now, didn't know what to do, was looking for some kind of a sense of a community or something. And here come Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on the door. It's kind of one of their tactics is to, they hope to kind of prey on emotionally vulnerable people. One thing we have to keep in mind, though, is it isn't, it's a common misconception that people who are stuck in religion are less intelligent than people who are on the outside. That's not actually the case. It's easy to, I can understand why people may feel that way to some extent. It's just not true, though. There are an awful lot of really intelligent people on the inside. I think Seth Andrews, I was talking to him about this recently. He was telling me the smartest people come up with the most elaborate ways of justifying and explaining this stuff to themselves. You know?
I'm sorry if I'm gonna interrupt you for a moment.
No, go ahead.
I actually tweeted at you a month ago. You know the tweet you got for I posted a picture of I was on a bus for a field trip, and there was a whiteboard which had the jw.org.
Yes, yeah, I remember. That was you, huh?
Yes. Yeah, that was me.
Oh my God, that's ridiculous. That kills me. It's like, how is
up,
that legal?
And I remember her bringing up Kingdom Hall and stuff.
Yep. Trying to get kids on the bus to go to the Kingdom Hall. That's ridiculous, man.
We were going to a stadium to see a basketball game, and
okay.
And on our when all of us got out, she gave cards to everyone to the local Kingdom Hall, and I'm like, I was just silent. And when I got to the nearest trash can, I just ripped it into pieces and then threw it in the trash, and just had a very big emotional breakdown because of my aunt.
Yeah. That's rough, man. Like, was it a school-sponsored thing, or was it like was it a school bus?
It was like a college career thing.
Oh, okay, okay.
And that's kind of weird if you're
that's messed up, man.
Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah, they're friggin' everywhere, man. I'm telling you, they're on every sidewalk. It's crazy.
One more thing I'd like to bring up. I brought up the first time I brought up Jehovah's Witnesses with my parents. It was on Christmas Eve, and I told them about how they hate gays and stuff, and how they're really judgmental. Yeah. And when I said, when I asked my dad, "Dad, do you know what Jehovah's Witness is?" And he said, "You mean the knock your door people?"
Right.
Because before his sister, which is my aunt, became a Jehovah's Witness, he only knew them as people who knocked on your door and talked about God for a few minutes. And
I know a lot of people view him that way.
And when he searched up Jehovah's Witness for the first time, when my aunt became a Jehovah's Witness, he was appalled about how much stuff they do in there. And he just decided to warn me about her becoming a Jehovah's Witness.
Well, I'm glad that he had his wits about him, you know, with regards to that. It seems, right?
But
helping you figure that out.
Stay with my aunt. The reason why I want to stay with my aunt just so I can go to Cedar Point for the weekend.
Right? Oh yeah, yeah. I've been in that area. Cedar Point's pretty cool. Yeah.
So, Mr. Telltale, if you would like to do I would really love to be on one of your podcasts so we can.
Okay, there is a way to do that. There's a sign up list.
Yeah, I'm on your Discord. I can contact you later.
Well, we're about to plug our stuff here at the end of the show. Now, I think we're gonna have to try to wrap things up. This is probably one of the longest.
That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you really for calling in, Dave.
It has been an honor being on your show tonight. I am so glad to talk to you for the first time, Mr. Telltale.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot one more thing. It's quick.
Okay, Dave, wrap it up. We got 30 seconds. Let's go.
Okay, the first time I heard of Caleb and Sophia was a top 22 list of crazy Christian shows, and I decided to research more about Caleb and Sophia, and I came across your channel, and that's how I met you. Okay, I'm done.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That is really cool.
That's great, Dave. Well, I'm glad we got to provide you a platform to talk to one of your heroes.
Yeah. All right.
And be sure to subscribe to Truth Wanted as well. We got to show some love over here. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're going to have to wrap things up. Thanks again for calling, Dave, and I hope to hear from you again soon.
All right. Bye.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
I think this has become officially like the longest episode of Truth Wanted so far. I'm not sure. I'm really sorry we've gotten to go so late, but man, it's been quite a pleasure being with you. Thanks for being on the show tonight.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame we couldn't talk to, I think his name was Yusuf, right?
Yes, I know. That was Yusuf, if you're still watching, like it's
really
not because it's not an interesting conversation. It's because we're just out of time tonight. It's really how it is to it. But again, I'll just plug my stuff here real quick, and then I want to give Telltale the chance to talk about his thing. Go ahead and subscribe here to Truth Wanted. We do a show here every week live on Friday nights at 7 o'clock Central Time. Again, I'm the host, Objectively Dan. You can contact me at truth at atheist-community.org, and I take in all those emails and stuff from there. You can also find me on Facebook with the Truth Wanted Facebook page, and I'm on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. Please go there. And if you like what you see and you want to see more of it, please go to the Truth Wanted Patreon. We appreciate everything that goes there. You can get an ad-free version of the show if you donate. And be sure to check out all the other shows here on the Atheist Community of Austin network, the Atheist Experience Network, if you will. We've got, of course, the Atheist Experience, Talk Ethan, and all kinds of other stuff here that you should definitely check out. Telltale, where can people find you at?
Yeah, you can find me on my YouTube channel, Telltale, self-titled. You can also find me on you can find my podcast, the Telltale Podcast, where I read extremist literature, like I've read ISIS propaganda before. Right now I'm in the middle of reading some Jehovah's Witness literature called Pure Worship of Jehovah, brand new book. Really, really fascinating stuff. Talk about current events, things like that. But yeah, I'm all over the place, so check me out.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Tal, thanks again, man. I hope we can have you again on the show. This was super, super cool. And in case we don't, you can find both of us at the Faithless Forum on April 27th. We're both going to be speaking there. It's a conference of YouTube atheist people. It's going to be really, really cool. Be sure to get your tickets on, I think it's faithlessforum.com, right? Yep. And definitely go and sign up there and check that out. Anything else you want to say before we close out tonight, my friend?
I think I'm good. I think that's it. You covered it.
All right. Sounds good, man. Well, this has been another great episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, Objectively Dan. And remember, always keep wanting the truth. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next week.